Court rejects bid to release frozen funds to Freedom Convoy organizers, Glenn McGregor reports. Glenn McGregor blocked me on Twitter, but I was mean to him, so I can understand. Glenn McGregor. Court rejects bid to release frozen funds to Freedom Convoy organizers. An Ontario court has rejected a request from two Freedom Convoy organizers to release $200,000 of frozen funds to pay for lawyers to defend a lawsuit launched on behalf of Ottawa residents and businesses. It's not... I'll steelman it in a second. I think it's a bullcrap, politically motivated decision from a political appointed judge, appointed by Lametti, minister of whatever, by the Trudeau government. It's obviously, in my view, political rubbish. I'll steelman it nonetheless. BJ Dichter, who I interviewed on the channel, and Chris Gara are among a long list of defendants named in the potential class action lawsuit filed in February. That's by Zexi Lee, who I think it's a $300 million class action lawsuit with 4 plaintiffs, and they couldn't get any more people to join to the class action. They will apparently, allegedly, they need the release of the funds so they can pay for their own bloody defense to a lawsuit filed against them. In the motion, Dichter and Gara asked for access to some of the money donated, by the way, by Canadians who wanted to support them. So they've seized donated money through crowdfunding platform Gibson, Go cryptocurrency transfers, and other sources, so they could mount a defense. But Justice Caleb McLeod on Tuesday denied that request, saying it would violate the agreement between the plaintiffs and other defendants to move about $5 million in donated funds into escrow pending a resolution of the lawsuit. If there's a written draft, agreed signed settlement that can't be modified by the court, which I would find surprising, okay. Access to the frozen funds should not be granted lightly because it would effectively subject frozen funds to be the death of 1,000 cuts and would risk undoing the effect of the agreement reached between the parties, McLeod wrote in his decision. The Ontario government has also filed a claim on the donated funds as potential compensation. This is where it's absolute outrageous. As potential compensation should ongoing criminal proceedings against several of the defendants result in convictions. Civil forfeiture of another name. It's like, imagine you get sued and they freeze your assets just in the potentiality that you're found guilty so that you can pay them off. And people do it when there's proof of fraud, when there's proof of certain malicious conduct that might show the deliberate dilapidation, disposal of assets to render someone judgment-proof. I'll steelman it there. That's the steelman. They're going to render themselves judgment-proof by disposing of assets. Typically, it's not using the assets for legitimate defense. It's transferring out of country, hiding assets, dilapidating assets, so that you render yourself judgment-proof, not using funds for the purposes of a defense. But that is the steelman argument here. Dichter, I presume, is of mild liquidity, although he might have assets. But just because you sue someone doesn't mean you get to ensure that you get paid if they don't happen to have assets. And it's not because you sue somebody that you can freeze up their assets so that they can't even use their own assets to mount a defense against the lawsuit that you filed against them. Some might view that as some form of litigious sabotage. I'm going to sue you because it's politically toxic. I'm going to get a judge to freeze your assets in advance on the basis of whatever, ill-gotten gains, fraudulent appropriation, potential abusive disposal of assets to frustrate a court order. They'll argue that, freeze your assets, and then lo and behold, you can't get a lawyer anymore because you have no assets to pay the lawyer. Typically, even in the event of seizures, you're allowed to liquidate funds if it's bona fide paying lawyers for the defense. And I can tell you this, I was involved in a very, very big file where this was specifically at issue. They tried to strangulate, suffocate the defendant because they had a judgment, a massive judgment. And as a result of which they seized and froze assets to satisfy the judgment. The guy was allowed to liquidate assets for money to pay his attorneys or her attorneys. Court rejects bid to release frozen funds. You don't say. Caleb McLeod, Just it's like from the article. And from March 16, 2020, Government of Canada, appoints judicial appointments in the province of Ontario. March 16, 2020, Ottawa, Ontario Department of Justice. The Honorable David Lametti. You may recall David Lametti because he testified during the Convoy hearing. He testified along with Justin Trudeau, who some are suggesting did not testify truthfully. The Honorable David Lametti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Oh, that's right. Lametti replaced Jody Wilson-Raybould. Justin Trudeau, because it's 2020, Justin Trudeau, women's rights activist, Justin Trudeau, the most ethical prime minister ever, the corrupt, unethical, misogynist prime minister who fired the first Indigenous female Minister of Justice and Attorney General that he hired her because she's a woman and it's 2020. He fired her because he's corrupt and she refused to abide by his corrupt orders, and he replaced her with David Lametti. Today announced the following appointments under the judicial application process established in 2016. The process emphasizes transparency, merit, and diversity, and will continue to ensure the appointment of jurists who meet the highest standards of excellence and integrity. The Honorable Caleb U.C. MacLeod, a judge of the Superior Court of Justice of Ontario, is appointed Regional Senior Judge of the Superior Court of Justice. He was already a judge, already appointed. Gets another title from Lametti, 2020. This is the judge ruling in the case. Found a way to justify not allowing the defendants to have access to monies that were donated by Canadians for their benefit so they can use it to fund their lawyers. Color me shocked. Although I could just as easily argue the other side. This is surreptitious manner of dilapidating the resources, and we won't have anything to execute against if and when we win in our $300 million class action lawsuit against the Freedom Convoy occupiers, insurrectionists of Canada. So that's the bad news coming out of Canada. That's it. The Canadians. I just read a chat that I'm not repeating out loud. Canadians donated. Americans donated to the Give, Send, Go. Also steelman this. I steelman everything. They found that 90% of the donations to the GoFundMe came from Canada, and 47% of the donations to the Give, Send, Go came from America. Recall that the Give, Send, Go campaign was set up after GoFundMe said, "Go F you," froze the accounts, said they were going to keep the money and give to a charity of their own decision, and then under enough pressure decided we're going to reimburse it to everybody. Then the Convoy set up a Give, Send, Go campaign, and it seemed that the gesture of Jim Watson, the mayor of Ottawa, politically interfering with GoFundMe to corrupt the purpose of GoFundMe, it seemed that pissed off a lot of Americans who then donated to Give, Send, Go. So, yeah, all judges are appointed in Canada for Honor 234 is right. I didn't go far enough back into Judge MacLeod's history as to who initially appointed him, but they're all appointed. They're not elected, and so there's no voting in or voting out. They're appointed, and they're appointed for life. Yeah, so the Give, Send, Go was in fact funded by 47% American money, and some might hypothesize, myself included, that it was only after they effed with the Convoy's ability to raise money. And people do consider political donations to be free speech, political speech. It was only after that it pissed off enough Americans that they donated to the Give, Send, Go. But they're going to say, if they dilapidate what they have there, that's going to be less for us to execute against when we win. Right, Your Honor? So that's the steelman argument. They have to freeze that because it might be the only asset against which they can execute. It'll make it a lot easier to execute against it if they are not able to mount a proper defense because lawyers don't work for free, and I don't blame them. Okay, that's the bad news coming out of Canada.